Hello. I'm Anton. I'm the co-founder of Holyheld. We create solutions that help people to spend their magic internet beans in the real world easier, but also at the same time is how to make those magic internet beans more useful to people outside of our world. So using traditional money. If that wasn't private enough description. So yeah, basically we can turn any self-custody wallet into a personal IBAN with a debit card on top of it. So whatever network, whatever token. So yeah, that's what we do.
Hello everyone, my name is Hubert. I have spent the former 7 years of my life building an online fraud prevention platform, scaling and effectively exiting this. I'm really passionate about data and how you can leverage data to make systematically better decisions. Since beginning of this year, we are building a verifiable data infrastructure. Privacy is one of the key characteristics for what we are building, so very happy to be part of this discussion.
Thank you for joining. And starting with you, Andreas, I'd love to ask about the topic that is, I think, relatively largely misunderstood still, which is privacy compliant? What does that mean? Can we even say that or state that? Is it even a discussion?
Compliant with what? That's always the question, right? And I think, you know, when we had the pre-discussions for the panel, essentially we need to distinguish a bit, at least from a legal side, between when we look at the what, compliant with what, who's actually the addressee of the question. So if we look at the regulated CeFi financial industry, that's one topic, or we look at DeFi or the integration, how to interact with DeFi, would be two additional topics. And the short response is, and I'll be happy to explore that together with you, is like, if you look at how regulators around compliance are currently built, privacy is not at the forefront on how they work. Current compliance regulations work still on the thought that I have passport copies and paper trails. Now they of course are digital, but you still kind of hold all the data of everybody you have KYC'd and checked, and you want to be able to store them, you want to be able to show them to the supervising authorities, and so privacy there, unfortunately, yet is not there. However, also in the regulated industry, I think what we see that holding data comes at a much higher price than it used to. So being data compliant, maintaining data in an appropriate way to comply with data protection regulations, that has a cost. So there is a tendency that you want to reduce that cost by not having data you don't necessarily need. And there were, I think there's a kind of the loophole where it could become very attractive to change regulations from the CeFi industry side of things. Whereas now on the other side, on the unregulated space, so where you don't need to kind of comply with particular AML, KYC compliance regimes, there of course it's very attractive because it's on a voluntary level. It increases efficiency and increases data security quite a bit. But I'm sure we're going to explore that in more detail.
Got it. Thank you. And then from the Swiss perspective, just maybe one word to broaden the scope. Why is Switzerland considered the best jurisdiction for privacy in the popular opinion?
Is it?
That's what people say, you know?
Okay, now, well, I think, you know, Swiss, we always have a bit a different approach than maybe your other European jurisdictions. So we try to kind of keep our body of governance a bit lower in terms of how much control you really need to have. So also data privacy laws are a bit more liberal on one hand, and then we have this tradition of privacy data. So I think that's probably what people are referring to, and I still think, yes, in terms of privacy, Switzerland is probably an attractive jurisdiction.
Anton, how do you folks process data within Holyheld? Like, what if I spend, say, I connect my non-custodial wallet, and I convert the funds, then I fund my essentially fiat account. Where does that data gets processed, and what's important from this perspective?
It's a very good question. Andreas, I really like your answer. It's like being compliant with what, right? So it depends on what services you provide, what you offer, who is the regulator, what kind of a license you hold. So for example, so we are a registered VASP, so virtual asset service provider. And then there's multiple levels of requirements that we have because the data can be different. Data is my passport, but also data is my financial history or operation. But then there's also the, for example, the data is the AML requirements, which is something that is not a single factor, but a combination of things. How does, forget about crypto for now, how does the bank consider you as a risky customer or not? Right, it's not a single factor point, it's a multiple factors. And now if you, what I really like about what Andreas said here is that, okay, we'd rather not to serve risky customers or figure it out as early as possible because of the amount of the data that and processing that we need to collect to understand, to confirm that it's a risky customer, not for our business. So how can we do it earlier? How can we do it cheaper? It may be a question to the audience. How many of you guys use Wise? And how many of you guys received an email recently about a data breach? Right, okay, there you go, right? So in here, it's sort of like, okay, did you ever provide your data to Evolve Bank and Trust? Like directly, okay. But all the others that raised their hand using Wise but received that email, you never provide it, but it's the provider that Wise is using or was using at the time. So the weakest link in this whole privacy part, because Wise is a regulated company in many different jurisdictions, so they have to adhere to these requirements, what they have to store, how long they store it for, what they do, but they also have the requirements and obligations to their banking partners. So your data now goes there. And I'm not, like, I don't ever read the terms and conditions. I guess nobody here really does, except from you maybe, because you're a lawyer. But it's like if you'd read it, you'd probably understand your counterparty risk, but nobody really does that as a regular user. So in our case, it's exactly the same approach that we take, is that what is the minimum required information that we need to take in order to provide the service that we're doing, which is, again, a virtual asset exchanging. And that's how we adhere to everything else. So how can we make sure that, yes, we comply with our license regulations, we are doing everything we can to keep the business safe, but at the same time, we do not collect any other data that we do not need. To give you a very simple example is, so Holyheld is available on mobile, web, so Android, iOS. We don't have marketing cookies, like at all. We don't do any analytics in the app. And for the simple reason is that we do not want to have this information. We don't want to keep it. We're not interested in basically sharing the cookie with some other providers, like, I don't know, for retargeting, like Facebook, Google, whatever it is. We're not interested in that. That's not our business. Our audience comes in here for a very specific need, is that I have digital assets. I want to use it as simple as I can outside of the world. Who are you as a business? Why do you want to know what I'm, my patterns, how long I stay in the app, or like what screens I watch on? That's not our business. So our approach in general, keep as minimum data as possible, only store what is required by law. That's as simple as that. And make sure that we can make safe decisions on making sure the business is safe. So that's our approach.
Thanks. I would love to ask you a follow-up question about how then do you work with improving the UX of the app without sort of tracking how users use it. But before that, Hubert, what's your approach? We have the compliance discussion. We have the approach of Holyheld to which data to process or store and to do as minimum as possibly required. How does it look like from vLayer perspective?
We do believe that privacy is effectively the end game. It's one of the promises that have been sitting underlying this entire ecosystem. And we do believe that we are, with certain technological advancements, we are becoming closer to be able to facilitate an economy between actors by being very selective when it comes to which data attributes are being leveraged for certain decision making. But more important than not, we can still leverage public blockchains without exposing the details of the attributes that should remain private. We do believe that one of the blockers, and actually that's one of our foundational hypotheses, is that smart contracts would become much more useful if smart contract developers would be able to leverage private Web 2 data sources within their creations. Obviously, it's a bit complicated if you would like to expose it directly, and we are talking about Ethereum, which is a public blockchain. But with zero-knowledge proofs and number of technological advancements happening over the last 18-24 months in the applied cryptography space, we do believe we are almost there, if not there, to be able to facilitate these kind of workflows. And then back to what Anton was mentioning, I couldn't agree more. Like, it's the traditional way of extracting as much and holding, just sitting on these scanned passports and all of the other attributes. This is completely irrelevant for the nature of business that these institutions are doing. And obviously the bills that they are paying in terms of making sure that the risk management is there and compliance is in check, it's significantly influencing their gross margins. We do believe that in the decentralized world, you will be able to be more effective because you take what you really need and you don't treat private data attributes public as default. Obviously, again, talking about MPC here, for instance, there are technical ways of making sure that there is a way of challenging a particular data point observation or a user without making everyone public by default. So maybe we should be really considering being private by default, and if there is significant reason to unravel the underlying data, that's where the data should be really exposed. And I do believe that we are really close to this, and I'm very happy to be seeing that privacy is actually becoming more and more relevant. Maybe one last comment here, coming a bit from the Web 2 space, is that for 2 decades or so, there was this gossip or a comment that you cannot use privacy as a selling point, as a unique selling point. Users don't care. That was the lobby of big tech companies that were effectively monetizing the data for the purpose of advertising. And if you look at, okay, Apple Intelligence can be criticized for many reasons, but if you look at word by word what their announcement is stating, they are actually saying that they are leveraging privacy as one of the unique selling points of what we are about to ship. So this is very interesting development because obviously that will be fueling whatever we are discussing here in the Web3 decentralized world.
You know what, just to add on this, you don't care about privacy until you do. Like the moment you search your name and it shows up that, you know, my documents are now being sold for cents on some platform out there because there was a leak, like that's the moment you start caring about it. Before that, sure, what's the problem? I have this very simple case about, you know, ZK stuff. I'm a very simple user. Every time I go to a bar, a club, if I shave my beard, I get asked for an ID because I look like a 15-year-old kid. So it would be so much easier. This is the real world use case there. It would be so easy if there was a tool that you can, the bouncer could just, scan it, and all it would reveal about myself is that, yes, this guy is, underage or overage, like legal age, etc. They don't need to know any of my other information. They're not required to, but they're required to know and to guarantee that, that's my legal age, so that, they don't have any problems there. There's a structural problem here. The problem with that is that they have the responsibility to make sure that, it's a valid ID, so it's not fake, and they've checked it. So that's, that's the extent of their liability. So now, if we introduce any other tool, that shifts the liability. The liability is still on them. They still need to make sure that that is true. And this is where the business start asking questions: can we trust this? Like, is it correct? Like, how does this app work? Like, what is that ZK stuff? Like, is it telling me the truth? And this is where we all need to work on to make sure that you can understand that the tech, the underlying core tech here, is unbiased. So if it works, it works. If it's true, it's true. This is where the really hard problem is that, not on the psychological level, because again, 2 more, 3 more data breaches and, people convert. All of a sudden you start caring about privacy. Before that, you don't. But when that happens, we need to make sure that this tech is different, like it works differently. Like it is, the core underlying logic there is different. And that's like how we Trojan horse into, a lot of the, use cases there.
Yeah, well, I agree with a lot of things you have said. I think where I don't agree is I think currently when we give out privacy, it's not because we don't care, but we get something in return. So we get free access to all great social networks, etc. And the price we pay is getting rid of our privacy. So it is a business model, and we go along with that. So to kind of change that thought line would need to a change in the business model itself. Someone wants to make money. But I think when you look at privacy now in finance, there the business model is normally not selling data. There the business model is selling financial services. So you can implement it quite nicely without needing to change the business model as such. So there the logic is a bit different. And my belief is we need to kind of raise pressure on efficiency. So the financial service providers actually don't want the data because it costs them more than not having the data in the first place. I see like the first, on the development side, the first use cases I really see in this connection on DeFi integration and DeFi interaction for regulated institutions. So as a VASP, for example, or if you're a protocol and you want to do your treasury management, and as part of your treasury management, you want to interact with DEXs, you want to use lending pools, because that's a very efficient way how to manage your digital assets. But in the same time, you need to be very careful that you remain the proceeds of that management activity bankable, because at the end of the day you're going to need to be able to pay your rent, you're going to need to pay the nice venues we're sitting in here, and the banks are going to look at the source of funds. And so ideally you interact with DeFi applications in your asset management activity, which you know they are to the extent possible compliant. You interact with DEX pools with no illicit funds or a very small threshold. So you kind of need to know that those DeFi setups are set up in a way that they're compliant on a voluntary basis. So you have the freedom to interact and make the funds bankable. And I think that's, in my view, one of the first use cases for that.
So essentially, just to summarize this part, there are essentially no regulations that would, clear as day, say ZK is fine and this is respected. But at the same time, if we do proceed on a best effort basis, we technically should be okay, and this doesn't necessarily have to constitute legal advice.
It's a long sentence to say yes as a lawyer. But there, yeah, no, yes, in principle, right. I think, when we look at regulations and how they change, normally they, compliance regulations that address CeFi players, they address the regulated market, and so the regulated markets need to lobby that those regulations are changed in a more efficient manner so they can save costs. That's normally how it plays out. And so my thought line would be that if you start implementing zero knowledge proof technology to show and demonstrate, hey, it really creates efficiency in one non-regulated sector, then you can advocate to the regulated sector, hey, start to change it as well, remain competitive.
Got it. And to build on that, Anton, I know we've talked about decentralized clearinghouses. What are your thoughts around that? When do you think we can see something like this actually usable?
I have a very interesting take on it. I'm very careful at saying anything decentralized. I think it's a very, very strong statement, and also I think, look, let's just take a very simple case, right? I think we all heard that allegedly Ethereum Foundation was being investigated for whether it was, sale was a security or not, and allegedly we'll hear rumors, right? At least I don't know the official sources there. It was considered as sufficiently decentralized. I like this term, right? Sufficiently decentralized, but it's case by case as to saying that, okay, what does it mean sufficiently decentralized? Like if there's 4 of us making the decision about something, is it sufficiently decentralized? And then you start looking deeper. Actually, we're friends because I'm wearing Aleph Zero cap, So maybe our votes are not so individual. So maybe now it's not sufficiently decentralized. I'll just playing around here, messing up. But my point here is that I think that's it's an iteration-based thing. You start with something, and as long as you improve, as long as you have a clear path as to how can you make it more unbiased, how can you make sure that, in my understanding, the decentralization here, it means that there's no individual party that can game the game in their advantage. So that if these are the rules that we all play together, we all agree to them, that's it. So the tech only makes sure that we all stay in line. And whoever is trying to play against the game, or against the rules, they get punished accordingly. And as long as everybody understands the rules and it's all clear, then you have an option and a path to go into the sufficiently decentralized stage. So to me, on-chain clearing is more about, again, it's a new tech. It's a tech, just like everything else. You don't look into Netflix and be like, oh my God, I'm going to use Netflix because they use these new, Kubernetes clusters on, like Google Cloud. No, it's because I have a movie and it works, right? And it's fast to load. So to me, this is like a boring thing, but it's actually really beautiful from the tech perspective. But at the end of the day, all it does, it just makes things more efficient. And efficiency creates new business models, creates better experience for us users. That's what we care. Like, we don't care if it's decentralized or not, if it's on-chain or not. All we care is that it's faster, I can do it, like it's easier. And this is where our boring work is inside. So in terms of when, definitely this year.
Cool. This is good to know. I totally agree with the definition of what decentralization is, and sort of the I think most of the infrastructures launched in the last 2 years have sub 200 validators, but it's not the only level of decentralization or centralization that we could talk about, definitely. Hubert, you work definitely more with data rather than finance itself. So I would assume that you have an easier job when it comes to implementing different privacy products. But you mentioned use cases in one of your previous answers. Could you shine a bit more light on that?
Sure. I love the example about the beer, and I couldn't agree more. Like the exact date of birth and some other details that are visible to the bartender at the moment of showing the ID, are completely irrelevant from the problem at hand. And you can imagine many other situations that just a subset of attributes would be enough to make everyone happy and everything operate according to the expectations of the system. An example would be like we all hear a lot about airdrops, and obviously jurisdiction of where the user is, especially from the tax residence perspective, is very relevant. And a very simple feature you can build using ZK and verifiable data infrastructure would be by processing or generating a proof that would only attest whether or not someone is US or not tax resident. And that feature alone, if it can be accessed or referenced as an on-chain claim from the smart contract, is already super powerful, because someone who is about to distribute a grant, and especially if we are talking about small grants, so like we are not qualifying by the amount, already would be very much in check, knowing that there is a verifiable, trustless way of actually confirming that this particular individual or the wallet associated with this individual is not associated with the US. And obviously these are some very granular use cases, but there is a bunch of more complex one. But at the end of the day, the intuition should be always the same: is the entire data set, attribute set, that is about to be part of a payload really necessary for the core service that is about to leverage this? In most cases, my experience is that it's not, and that's where we should fight for efficiency. It will be easier to discuss with the regulator if the subsets are smaller, and then again, like, we need to make the effort. It will not happen for us. Like, it's a very difficult discussion that we need to have.
We agree to disagree. There's no disagreement here. It's like, what's going on, guys?
I mean, it was a rapid plan. We had this agenda prepared, and then 1 minute before the panel, they were like, "Hey, let's just fight on stage." But it was a very cordial fight. So Okay, we're over time, I think. So maybe let's close with one sentence answers. What got you all into the space? You've all been in crypto for a while. So the first question is what got you into the space, and the last one is what still keeps you in it and what still keeps you going. One sentence for each.
Oh, well, for me, it's simple. It's technology and changing technology and moving, kind of being able as a legal advisor to help design technology in compliant ways. So that's what brought me into that and keeps me into that.
I have no involvement in the space. For any future reference, I don't know why I'm here. I was brought into this group chat, right? Anyways, so my serious answer is I love when the product that we built, other people use, and it solves their problem, like they enjoy it. To me, crypto is a tech that allows me to build these use cases and experiences that people enjoy and love. And somehow I love finance. I don't know why. I think I have a problem. But combining the two, that's why I ended up in the space. As to what keeps me here still, it's a tough one. I think we all should ask this question. I don't know. I honestly don't know. So, yeah.
A few very short answers. First of all, fighting fraud within Web 2 made me pissed at large financial institutions. Second of all, I'm quantitative economist, so I believe in two things, data and utility functions. I met my co-founder and he showed to me very tangibly how little you can do, like how little utility, relatively little utility there is in smart contracts. And it was frustrating for me not to try to add more utility by injecting additional data sources there. And I'm here to stay.
Thank you. And I do think we have to wrap up, right? Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you.
you.
All
Thank
for
you. Thanks a lot.
coming.